It's sickening. It really is. When you see this kind of mass inflation and a total reluctance from our leaders to acknowledge it, we have a problem. The latest inflation read is in, and wow, it's not good. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish, and just a quick mention here, parts of today's program are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. There's clearly never been a better time to invest in precious metals than right now, so go to legacypminvestments.com. Again, legacypminvestments.com. We got prices skyrocketing 7.5%. Okay, this is more than people anticipated. The expectation by most economists was for like 7.2%. This is a big deal, okay, because it means you're paying 7.5% more for everything this year than you were last. Well, guess what? Your wages aren't going up 7.5% to keep up with this. So all it means is that things have gotten more expensive. This is why when I told you about the misery index just yesterday, I was explaining that it's at the worst level, the highest level, which means the worst, that it has been in since 2008, since the aftermath of the Great Recession, because prices are going up and things feel lousy. I mean, even if the job market is as strong as they say it is, if everything costs more, people just don't feel really good about things. This is on Joe Biden right now. Even though he doesn't want to admit it, he doesn't. In fact, he came out with a statement admitting, yes, these are elevated numbers, quote, elevated, not like this is awful, this is really high, elevated numbers. But you know what? They're going to subside. They're going to go away. Just like, inflation's transitory, whatever. Let me share with you his statement. Quote, while today's report is elevated, forecasters continue to project inflation easing substantially by the end of 2022. Oh my goodness, like the president is actually trying to sound like he's an economist with language like that. Easing. I'm sorry, that's like econ speak. All right, just talk like a normal person, Joe. Isn't that supposed to be what you are? Just put it in plain speak, okay? He's trying to say that it's going to get better. He's going to say, okay, it's going to get better by the end of 2022. Just give me a year, folks. Just give me a year. He goes on, quote, and fortunately, we saw positive real wage growth last month and moderation in auto prices. Again, the language cracks me up. Moderation in auto prices, give me a break, which have made up about a quarter of headline inflation over the last year. By the way, auto prices, they've been outrageous, right? Like you saw the latest numbers most recently that were up like 37% for used car prices. Quote again, we separately saw good news with new unemployment claims continuing to decline. Yeah, that's only because everybody had to turn off the free checks that you were giving out with all that coronavirus stimulus. I go back to his quote. That's a sign of real progress we've made in getting Americans back to work over the last year. My administration will continue to be all hands on deck to win this fight. We will continue to rebuild our infrastructure and manufacturing so we can make more in America and strengthen our supply chains here at home. Okay, good. I'm all for that. You know what? I love the Intel thing. Intel is building a plant in Ohio. We need more of that, okay? They're going to spend $100 billion to become the world's largest semiconductor operation there in Ohio. That's great. We need more of that. You've got to come up, Joe Biden and company, with more ways to incentivize businesses to be here, to be creating jobs for here, as opposed to every other country in the world, right? We don't want those jobs going to places like Taiwan because it makes us more dependent on having military operations there in the South China Sea to protect the American companies that are operating in Taiwan, right? And by the way, I'm not against having some stuff there, but for goodness sake, shouldn't we be the thriving center of manufacturing? Shouldn't we be doing everything we can to bring these jobs home? I'm getting a kick out of his like econ speak, like trying to talk above people in some way, shape, or form. I used to know a lot of television personalities in the financial news space that used to love to do that, especially when we were in meetings with producers, because the television producers then wouldn't know what the heck they were talking about. And they kind of loved it because then they sounded smarter than everybody else. It's always been my goal to make sure that, because I love this stuff, right? Like, like I eat, sleep, and breathe all these econ data numbers, and I love how we can interpret this. But it's my goal to make it understandable and accessible to everybody, as opposed to using the fancy schmancy econ speak and talking over everyone's head. It just cracks me up that Biden plain old Joe is now trying to speak like he's some kind of sophisticated market watcher. Anyway, I'll tell you what, this is what people get. They know that this inflation is going to cost us all, because when they look at these numbers, I mean, it's costing them, right? Energy up 27%, but that's not even gas prices. Gas prices, that's the overall energy number, so everything. Gas prices up 40%, grocery prices up 7.4%. Rent saw the biggest increase in 20 years, for goodness sakes. Furniture, I hope you're not furnishing your home right now, because it's going to cost you 9.3% more this year. I mean, the problem with all this is it's very hard to get a handle on it. I know that the president is saying, oh, don't worry, by the end of the year it'll be all A-okay. It's just transitory. It's just temporary. And again, I'm going back to the econ speak. The forecasters continue to project inflation easing substantially. Well, you know what? It's not going to ease substantially. It's not going to get much better unless the Fed, shows some tough love. And that tough love, that medicine, so to speak, that the economy is going to have to chug down, is not going to be very pleasant, because once you start to put the brake, right, on all that money that's in the system, so much money, they've just been printing it, then that causes a pullback, right? Because it's going to make money less easy to access. And that pullback is necessary. It's healthy, right, in terms of the inflation picture. But what about everything else? And how does the market balance all of this? The market's going to start to get really nervous. If you do not have the Federal Reserve, they're propping everything up. It's pretty bad. And just to explain here, you know what? Long term, this is extremely bad. It's extremely bad because, I just point out that great societies, great empires, right? When they've fallen, it's usually been because of things like inflation, things like spending more than you have, things like living off the dole, things like mass military operations all around the world. Oh gosh, am I talking about us today or the Roman Empire? Because this is all what led to the fall of the Roman Empire. And look, we've had a good, few hundred years. We've had a nice run of it. But how much longer can this last when we're stretched so thin, right? In terms of all our military operations, in terms of all the money printing, in terms of all the obligations that we're taking on, the living off the dole thing. Heck, they want even more of it. They want to spend even more of your money. Joe Manchin coming out today, good for Joe Manchin, and saying, this is insane. The idea that we would be spending more and printing more and putting more programs into place when you've got this much inflation, 7.5%, is so absolutely positively wrong. And you know what? I got to hand it to Joe Manchin. I am just continually impressed by him and his willingness to stand up to his party right now, because we need that. We need more of that in Washington. Look, somebody's got to get a handle on this. Otherwise, we risk. I'm not kidding. And this is not being over dramatic. I mean, I think that, again, we've had, a nice couple hundred years and change. But the reality of the situation is, when you have economic fundamentals that are this messed up, if you don't start to get this back in check, you're going to have problems. We saw it in the 1970s. Fortunately, we came out of that. Why? Because we had Paul Volcker there at the Federal Reserve. We had Ronald Reagan there as president, and they were both committed to making sure inflation was in check. I don't see the willingness on behalf of the president right now. I don't see the willingness on behalf of the Fed. Heck, they still haven't raised rates. I mean, they're not going to do it until March, and that's if they do it, for goodness sakes. Reminder, everyone, I'm going to be live on Locals this Friday. That would be tomorrow at 12 noon, so let's make it a lunch day. I'd love to have you there. This is a wonderful new social media platform where I think you're going to love it. You can interact directly with me. We've got a nice little group there. I want to encourage you to go to trishregan.locals.com. Again, that's trishregan.locals.com, and I'll be talking to you and taking your questions, and we'll have a good time as we decipher through all this news. But I warned you, I warned you that it was going to be bad, and I've been sitting here pounding the table since July of 2020, really June of 2020. And I remember some of, my friends were like, Trish, you gotta lay off this inflation thing. People need these coronavirus stimulus checks, etc. And I said, mark my words, it's going to be a problem. Our economy cannot handle this influx of cash, both from our federal government in terms of the executive office and Congress, obviously, and the Federal Reserve simultaneously. It's too much, and we're going to pay the price by way of inflation. And yet Biden comes into office, and what's the first thing he does? He hands out more checks. He's just handing out money, and then, it's not enough. No, we've got to do Build Back Better. Look, Americans are not stupid. They know what this means when they're paying 7.4% more at the grocery store, or nearly 10% more if they're lucky enough to buy new furniture for their home. They get it. Or 40% more at the gas pump. This is hurtful. And you know what? You think about real estate. I mentioned rents. They don't actually look at home prices overall because, home prices, they've been going up so much. They took this number away from the CPI index back in the 1980s, so a long time ago, and they don't actually calculate it, but it's pretty bad, right? So home prices are way up. So what does this mean for young Americans and old Americans? It's tough, right? I mean, hopefully if you're out there and you're middle-aged and you're earning a living, you're able to manage this, but how are you going to put more money away for retirement? I mean, these are real questions. And if you are in retirement and you're living on a fixed income, then it takes a bigger chunk out of your savings. And if you're just starting out, kind of hard to buy that new house when prices keep going up. And then you're going to have the Federal Reserve coming in and making interest rates higher, as they need to, and they should have done a long time ago, frankly, or at least cut back on all that money printing. And that in turn is going to make it more difficult for young people to get mortgages. All of this is a problem. And look, you know that Legacy Precious Metals is one of the sponsors of this show, but I'm telling you this just separate from that. I mean, it's important to plan. It's important to think through what all this inflation is going to be. I told everybody to buy gold back in June 2020. It was a call that I thought was important at the time because, again, knowing that you're going to hold this for a very long period, that this is something that you're not going to need tomorrow, but you know that as you plan your financial future, you want to make sure that you have pockets of your portfolio that are dedicated to hedging this inflation. And gold historically has been a pretty decent hedge. And so it's one of the reasons why I keep saying, take a look at this. I mean, there's other means. We've got a terrific real estate investor coming on the program tomorrow, Charlie Dombeck from Key City Financial. And Key City Capital rather, and he's going to explain some of the real estate investing that can be done right now, especially in certain markets, right? Because certain markets are more likely to succeed than others, especially as the Fed raises rates. But I like real estate. I like gold, precious metals in general. I like making sure that I am diversified and hedged against all of this inflation. So I would say this regardless of whether they were helping and partnering with me in this program. I really do believe it. So when you can, give him a call. There's a great guy over there named Charles. You've probably seen him on the program as well. And his team can help navigate the space for you. Their number is 1-866-589-0560. Again, 1-866-589-0560, legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. And just know that, I mean, this is important right now. Your dollar is losing value every minute of the day. This new number proves it. Inflation is a silent killer. It's a hidden tax felt absolutely positively by everyone. So Legacy Precious Metals is the company I trust to help navigate this space. You can get a gold-backed IRA. You can actually buy the gold yourself. I'd give them a call. Talk to an IRA expert or just a gold expert over there if you want to buy the physical stuff and put it in your basement in the safe. Because you never know what's going to happen these days, in all seriousness. 1-866-589-0560. And a quick reminder, again, we can talk about gold some more if you want, inflation some more. I want to talk about the truckers because I'm just so amazed and so impressed with these peaceful protests that, look, I mean, Trudeau's freaking out. You've got France freaking out. They're going global, by the way. You got the U.S., DHS freaking out. Everybody's freaking out. And these are peaceful protests. I have not seen any evidence thus far that it's anything like, by the way, the protests we saw. Remember Black Lives Matter in the summer of 2020? Those were pretty awful. And somehow everybody, on the left gave that one a pass. I'm like, But why? Like, that's actual violence. There's stealing, there's looting. We haven't seen that with the truckers. Anyway, we got to talk a little bit more about the truckers. We've got to talk about how DHS is trying to crack down on this quote unquote misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, you name it. Any information that doesn't agree with us is bad. I think it's a very slippery slope and it's a dangerous thing to be doing. So join me tomorrow, 12 noon on Friday at Locals. That's trishregan.locals.com. And I will see you then.